Good evening, Clubhouse. I am so glad to be with you. Are you guys ready to get started? I have heard of a saying that says this: practice what you preach. Now, I don't think that means that I should practice over and over and over again like I'm practicing my piano. Does that mean I should practice like I'm at soccer practice or football practice? Practice what I preach. No, practice what you preach means something a little bit different, doesn't it? It actually means to do something. So to practice what you preach means that you're actually doing what you tell other people to do. Here's a question to think about. Why is it important for a leader to do what he's teaching others to do? Throughout the year at Clubhouse, especially for Pumped Up and God's Girls, you've been learning about what Jesus has taught. Treating people like you want to be treated, spending time praying to God, put God's kingdom first, love your enemies, speak the truth, have no room for bad anger. Tonight, we're going to learn about the most important week of history. And I want you to listen and see if you think Jesus practiced what he preached. You have heard this story before. In fact, we just heard it over Easter week. But I want you tonight to listen with kingdom ears to see if Jesus did what he taught others to do. So keep that in mind as you listen to this story about Easter. I'm going to share my screen as I tell the story. No. Be patient. There we go. Okay. We've talked a lot about the Pharisees. What was the most important thing to the Pharisees? Do you remember? They wanted to follow the rules. They thought if they followed the rules, they would be accepted by God. They even made up their own rules to follow, and they were really proud of their rules. They were sure that God liked them better than anyone else because of all the rules. Now, rules are fine, and God's rules are great. But now people might look at what we do on the outside, but is that what God looks at? Not at all. He looks at our heart. And Jesus said that the Pharisees were saying nice things with their mouths about God, but their hearts were far from him. Inside, the Pharisees were proud, sinful show-offs. Ooh. Do you think Jesus was very happy with the Pharisees? It was their job to help people come to know God. But instead, here they were teaching people things about God that weren't even true. The Pharisees were teaching people that they had to earn their place in God's kingdom. But Jesus taught a very different message. He taught that people that were spiritually needy in their hearts could enter the kingdom. And it wasn't about keeping rules. It was about trusting God. As more and more people heard Jesus speak and saw his miracles and how he treated other people, more and more people started to follow him. How do you think that made the Pharisees feel? No, they didn't like it one bit. And because they wanted the people to follow them, the Pharisees missed being the center of attention, and they just wished that Jesus would just go away because they were jealous of Jesus. Jesus ended up planning a special meal with his disciples. We call it the Last Supper. Now, before they ate, Jesus washed the disciples' feet. Remember when we talked about that? Jesus humbled himself and treated his friends with honor, like he would want to be treated. Then Jesus ate and drank with his friends. He told them all the things that were about to happen so they wouldn't be afraid. He told them all that was in God's perfect plan. Jesus knew that the Pharisees were sending soldiers to capture him soon. So Jesus took his friends to one of his favorite places, a garden of olive trees called Gethsemane. And it was one of his favorite places because it was a private place where he could pray. He asked them all to pray so that God would give each of them strength. Jesus knew that the next couple of days were going to be the hardest days of their lives. He wanted them to be prepared. And Jesus spent that entire evening praying to his heavenly dad. Here is what the Bible says he prayed. This is Matthew 26, verse 39. He went a little farther, then he fell with his face to the ground. He prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, take this cup of suffering away from me. But let what you want be done, not what I want." What was this cup of suffering that Jesus talked about? Jesus knew that he was about to be arrested, lied about, beaten, and much worse, even though he had never done anything wrong. But Jesus told his heavenly dad that he would allow these things to happen. It was all part of God's beautiful plan to make a way for us to enter his kingdom. Jesus was willing to put God's kingdom first. When the men came to arrest Jesus, Peter pulled out his sword and struck a soldier. Jesus told Peter, "Put your sword away." Then Jesus reached out and healed the wounded soldier. Jesus healed the man who had come to arrest him. Jesus showed love to his enemy. Could Jesus have broken free from the soldier? Well, of course he could have. He had power over everything, even death. He could have spoken and all of the men would have fallen to the ground. Jesus allowed the men to take him away. The soldiers took Jesus to the Pharisees and the chief priests. They put Jesus on trial. I'm guessing most of you have seen a trial on TV. In a trial, a lawyer or a judge asks lots of questions to find out the truth, to find out if someone is guilty or innocent. This was not a regular trial. The men in this trial weren't interested in the truth. They only wanted to find an excuse to kill Jesus. The Pharisees made up lies about Jesus. They said that he told people not to pay their taxes. That wasn't true. The Pharisees claimed that Jesus was lying when he said he was the Son of God. They said he should be killed for being a liar. But Jesus wasn't a liar. Jesus spoke nothing but the truth. Now, by this time, it was very, very late at night. It's really interesting that the Pharisees put Jesus on trial in the middle of the night. Guess what? It was against the law to hold a trial in the middle of the night. Kind of weird, but that's the law of the time. It was against the law. The Pharisees were breaking their own laws. Also, they lied about Jesus. What is God's commandment about lying? The commandment specifically tells us not to lie about someone else. So the Pharisees were breaking that law too. Now, were the Pharisees practicing what they preached? No, they preached about keeping laws, but here they were breaking laws. Even though there was no proof, they all decided that Jesus was guilty of lying and that he must be killed. They put a blindfold on him and hit him and spit on him. Jesus was completely innocent and he was completely powerful. And yet he did not fight back when he was treated so terribly. He allowed the men to hurt him. Come on. There we go. Jesus had no room for bad anger. Now, we know the rest of the story. I'm going to kind of summarize it. After this, the chief priests take Jesus to Pilate, the ruler at the time, because the Pharisees didn't have the authority to actually kill Jesus. Only the Romans could. And so then they went through that whole process of Pilate asking the crowd, should I release the king of the Jews or should I release Barabbas? And the Pharisees and the chief priests get the crowd all riled up and agree to say, let's release Barabbas. And so in fact, that's what they do. And through all that, we have to keep in mind, Jesus continues to practice what he preaches. Even in the most difficult situation imaginable, Jesus did what he taught. He treated his friends with honor. He prays to his heavenly dad. He puts God's kingdom first. He shows love to his enemies. He speaks nothing but the truth. And there's no room in his heart for bad anger. And he's able to do this because he's the king of a very different kind of kingdom. Now, you'll have to come back next week to hear the most amazing part of this story and how it can change your life forever. Tomorrow, however, I'd love to see you in our Zoom session called Clubhouse Connect. At 6:30, cross trainers and girls club are welcome to join me. At 7 o'clock, Pumped Up and God's Girls can come. Small group leaders, I'd love to see you guys come too. We had a great time last week, and I can't wait to see you there tomorrow. Bye.